All right. Joe Pohlen is in town from Michigan. We've actually just been, we've become friends on Twitter over the last year, but we've spent the last hour having a great conversation. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. Joe, thanks for coming all the way to Fort Worth today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're kind of cut from the same cloth. We're both born in 87. We both started buying homes with Countrywide's over-levered loans in the early 2000s. And so here we are today.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey.
So let's just start with your journey, just a little bit about how you started, and then let's get into the business you're running today.
Yeah, so growing up, I always wanted to own my own business. I've looked up to the business owners in town. No one in my family owned their own business, but it seemed like that was the path for me. And when I went to college, got into real estate. And when I was a freshman in college, I bought my first house, and I would rent the other rooms out. So I'd finance it as owner occupied. And then every 6 months I'd move and built that up to about 10 houses when I graduated. And that was in 2010. So the financial crisis was in full bore. No jobs out there. But I did pick up a job as a court-appointed receiver. So I worked for the Department of Justice and some other organizations. So if you didn't pay your taxes and they came in and threw you in jail, someone had to run your business. That was what I did out of college. And then we would sell those businesses. So what I ended up learning on that is man, you make way more money buying this stuff from the courts than you ever would running it. So I left that to actually buy businesses out of receivership. Went through, picked up about 300 apartments, a bunch of self-storage. And then in 2015, beginning of 2015, I really wanted to make the jump into owning my own business, not just real estate. And a developer friend of mine owned 16 acres in town. And he's like, well, I think senior housing would be good here. And I was like, well, if I could figure out how to do it, could I get part of the ownership for it? And he's like, whatever, go look around. And I ended up meeting a guy named Chuck who had experience running assisted living buildings, and he had left his old group. And I was like, hey, you want to, try to do a senior living deal here? Ended up not working on that parcel. And we worked for about a year. And then he's like, man, I've got this deal in Pennsylvania. I had completely underwritten. It's a great deal. It's 3 times bigger than what we were looking at. I was like, well, let's go do it. Let's go see it. And ended up putting together a deal on 2 buildings in York, Pennsylvania. And that closed December 15th of 2015. And that was the official start of Cardinal. It was 240 units. And then we grew in Pennsylvania since then. So now we have 7 buildings in Pennsylvania, and we've got 4 locations in Michigan.
That's awesome. So wait, real quick on the receivership. So you graduated, you went to work. So I have a business, it's going under. I haven't paid my taxes. I've done something. Your company's coming in to run it with the sole focus of either selling it or liquidating all the assets and taking it to zero.
That's correct. So we reported to the judge. So your creditor can put you into receivership. So what they would do is they'd go in front of the circuit court and say, Chris isn't running the business to protect the assets. He's doing some fraud or something like that. We want the court to appoint a receiver to actually go in and run the asset while we kind of figure everything else out on the side. And that's what I did.
Is there anything you learned during that period that you're feel lucky that you took that role and it'll serve you well the rest of your life?
I think there was a big part of just seeing behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot of zeros on a deal doesn't mean it's the people working those deals are any smarter than the people doing single family stuff. And getting to watch how the banking relationships work, that to lend $100 million is about is easier than lending $100,000 in some cases. So I think it gave me some confidence. And at 18 years old, when I finished college, I was just before I was 21. I had I was put in a position that I probably shouldn't have been in, and kind of got to grow into that role, and with other people's money. It was nice.
That's awesome. All right, before we get into your business, what are you and what aren't you? Because I think a lot of listeners, even myself included, think of senior living as kind of this blanket statement. So what do you do and what don't you do?
Yeah, so I'd like to define this as the different sandboxes of senior living. So the first one is 55 and up apartments. So this is just, there's not going to be any kids there. So you just over 55, it's like renting an apartment that everyone's familiar with. The next step up is independent living, which I describe as kind of like a cruise ship. So you move into an independent living, all your housekeeping's taken care of, your food's taken care of. They have activities, they do transportation, but nothing related to healthcare at all. So you have to manage your own medications, anything health related, you're responsible for. The next step in that journey is what I do, which is assisted living. So we employ people who manage your medications. We manage the software that's associated with the medication management. About half of my hours are actually that nursing department. So it's way more labor intensive than an independent living. And then part of independent living is memory care. So memory care is even higher staffing, more specialized staffing. And then the unit is locked. So it's for people with dementia who are wander risks. And I do memory care as well. And then the final step is a nursing home. And a nursing home is where their primary payer is going to be Medicare, Medicaid, or an insurance provider. The average length of stay is significantly less. The health issues that the residents have are far more severe. And skilled nursing or nursing homes, that bucket, they bill on a per day basis, where I'm billing on a per month basis, and all of my residents are private pay.
And do you make the decision that it's time to go to a nursing home, or is that a family decision? Like, when do you know it's time to move on?
Yeah, if your care needs are far beyond what our staff can do. So if you need a trach, or you need wound care, or you just need a lot more assistance, then we would call your family and then bring the family in and say, it's best that you transfer to that higher level of care.
And how old's your average resident, and kind of what's the breakout? I think we had just been talking about male to female, and let's get into a little bit about why there's more females than males.
Yeah. So our average resident's an 87-year-old widow.
Okay.
I'm operating in coal country, Pennsylvania, and blue collar working towns. And, just you think about someone who's in their late 80s, early 90s, their husband had probably worked a pretty dangerous job, and the life expectancy for women is longer than men. And this is really the last 5 years of someone's life when they're in assisted living. So a lot of them make that move ultimately because a spouse had passed away.
Yep. All right, we're going to get back into the people side of it and everything that goes on day to day. I mean, even the last hour of us talking has been fascinating, but let's just talk about how you structure the business. So we had talked about OpCo versus real estate. You're not really in the real estate business. So talk about let's just start with, how do you find a deal, and what does a deal look like to you?
So senior or assisted living deals aren't openly marketed because the person who's operating that assisted living building does not want people to know it's selling, because there's a lot of staff, there's families. It's always done kind of on the hush-hush off market. So there are a handful of brokers. It's kind of, we call it's a huge industry, but it's very small. I mean, everyone knows each other. So an owner would reach out to a broker. They would get the property under contract, and that broker would call up operators in the area that they think would be good operators. And then we would get a call, and then we'd get all the information on the property. We'd secret shop it, and we'd decide if we want to do that. And the way we've done deals in the past is a private equity group goes in and they buy the real estate. All the value of the OpCo is all built into the real estate price. So there's just one price. And then when they close on the purchase, I sign a triple net lease. It's a 15-year triple net lease with 3 5-year renewals. And then I'm responsible for everything related there. And they, I send them a check, and they send their bank a check, and then I continue to run it. And hopefully I can push values by increasing occupancy and running better margins. And then they are getting my financial performance on a monthly basis. And as I continue to improve the operations of the business, the values assigned to the real estate, so they ultimately get a refinance and hopefully get all their cash back. So that's how we've moved.
So closing, I'm just throwing out a number. We're going to pay $10 million for this facility. It's financed like a real estate transaction, but at closing, you're basically bifurcating the real estate in the opco. Then that opco is being owned by you, livecardinal.com or Cardinal
Yep.
Capital.
Yep. So we brand per building, and
Okay.
then we set up an opco per building.
Okay.
And the opco would just, the first day the opco exists would be the day that everything started for that building. So in a scenario where someone bought the real estate for $10 million, we'd sign a lease somewhere in the area of $700,000 to $900,000 a year, triple net lease. And, we'd be off and running. If we needed runway cash, so if the property wasn't cash flowing, that at the beginning, that's on us. And then ultimately, what I'm trying to do is we have a term in the industry, EBITDAR. So, I'm trying to just drive that EBITDAR number as high as I can, pay my landlord the rent, and then I keep what's left.
What's R?
Rent.
Oh, EBITDA before rent.
Yeah.
Or earnings before rent. Okay, so how do you finance them going in? Is it financed like a real estate transaction with like 30% equity down and a real estate loan, or is it financed with two separate loans on opco versus real estate, or how's it all?
There's just one real estate loan that's on there. A lot of the holy grail for our industry is to be able to get the loan to HUD, Housing Urban Development, a federally backed loan. So what a lot of the HUD groups will do is they'll offer bridge financing. So you have 3 years they do a very high loan to value with a high interest rate. And then you have 3 years to turn it around and get it stabilized. And then they put a HUD loan on it. And that's when the investor would get their cash back.
Do you, when you're looking at them, are you looking for things that are low on occupancy or just totally mismanaged? Like when you see the right deal, what's usually going on at the facility at that time?
So the right deal for us is usually a second generation owner who's burnt out. This wasn't their passion. It was their parents' passion. It's a tough business to be in every day if you don't love it. And so ideally a scenario would be one where the owner really doesn't believe in sales and marketing. They don't want to use third-party referral sources like a caring.com or a place for mom. And they have seen the regulation come up on more and more regulation in the industry and just kind of want to get out. And they've been burnt and they've pretty much gave up 3 years ago. And their occupancy is sitting somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. And then the asset will trade not on a NOI or cap rate basis. It's just going to be on a price per bed basis.
Yeah. And on the real estate lease, are you just solving for like a cap rate with your group, or is it a certain base rent plus a percentage of whatever you, however much you lift the operating income?
So we've done them multiple ways. We've done a fixed base rent and try to get that number as low as possible, and then done a percent rent. So where the free cash flow, half of the free cash flow would be given as additional rent, and I'd keep the other half. That would lower the risk to me, but obviously cap my upside. But I prefer doing the triple net lease, where every dollar in, dollar out is mine, and frankly, no one's really in my kitchen with how I'm running my business.
Okay, so we've closed on a deal. We found something from a second generation owner. You and I are going to be partners for the rest of this conversation.
All right, let's do it.
We've closed, and I'm the partner that doesn't know a damn thing, who's just asking questions. All right, day one, you've closed. What are you doing that is doing things better than the folks before you?
So what we look at is we pride ourselves on being a sales and marketing company.
Okay.
We are kind of unapologetically sales focused. A lot of our competitors are nonprofit operators who think, sales is a dirty word. Some of our competitors don't even have salespeople, and it's a very competitive industry. So our salespeople at Cardinal actually make more than anyone else in the company. We're sales focused. We hire nurses who believe that a vacant bed is a resident who's living at home, eating a can of peas, and is not managing their medication. It's an offense to our community to have a vacant bed. So we try to build a sales culture inside the buildings, and we like to say that if you are coming with your loved one into our building, and you're walking down the hall, and if we can get the housekeeper to truly believe this, that she wants to care for your loved one, and she comes up and she's like, Mr. Powers, I'm so glad you came and checked out this room. I really hope you choose A hall. A hall is my hall. I'm going to love on your dad, and I'm going to take great care of your dad. I mean, if we can get the housekeeper to truly believe that and love your loved one, you're going to move in. I mean, you'll come in and you'll ask about price and square footage and activities, but that's not what you're actually trying to figure out. What you're trying to figure out is, are the people here going to love my mom the way I love my mom? Mm-hmm. That's what you're trying to figure out. Everything else, the dancing fountains and the CapEx and the price, none of that matters. That's what you're ultimately trying to figure out. And if we can continue to build a culture at Cardinal where people love the elderly and like truly, truly care about the elderly, all the other stuff will work itself out.
Yeah. When you say sales, is it sales like from when somebody actually walks through the door, or is this outbound sales too, where you're looking at maybe who's in the community that you need to be calling on, or calling their kids to say, why is your parent still at home?
Yeah, so we have our salespeople do a lot of outbound. They'll still be in rehab facilities, talking to discharge planners at hospitals, trying to build trust with them. I'm talking about elder law attorneys, realtors, Facebook marketing, radio ads, etc.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Okay, so these folks walk in. Well, before I get to that, did you come up with this idea of this sales-driven culture? Was this your partner, Chuck? Like, because when you tell me like most of the industry doesn't think this way, who's bringing this philosophy into the organization?
Yeah, so Chuck had the experience in senior housing. He actually ran a company similar to what Cardinal is before. And Chuck was one of the top regional sales managers for Holiday Retirement, which is the largest operator of independent living in the country. And then the second top regional sales manager is actually our COO, Lisa. So, I kind of come from a sales and marketing background. So the top three people at our company all, are kind of unapologetically sales junkies. And we love learning about sales, and we believe in sales. And Lisa has her nursing home administrator's license and has worked her way up from being a care aide, making minimum wage, all the way up to being our COO. And she believes in the sales and marketing. We have a lot of fun with that line of our business.
And are you going in and working with the existing staff from the prior owner and just retraining them? Or are you usually coming in and bringing in a few of your own people to help work with those people? Like, how do you kind of take over a new property?
In the past, what we've done is try to go in and try to make the current staff Cardinal people. And it really hasn't been that successful. Yeah. We are doing a better job of kind of growing our own kind of Cardinal folk. And as the company has gone along, you can start to sense, like who's going to be a Cardinal person and who's not going to be a Cardinal person. So now on acquisitions going forward, we're usually always replacing like the top administrator and the salesperson.
So like you told me when we were talking earlier that some of these facilities you bought might be at 35 to 65% occupied when you buy them. How quickly is your lease-up plan? Is that like a 2-year lease-up plan, a 2-month lease-up plan? Depends, property to property.
It'll take us over a year to get it stabilized. In the first 6 months, it's really trying to find the light switches, trying to figure out who's who, trying to like really assess the staff and try not to rush it. And, after we kind of finally get all the people in the right position, it goes relatively quickly. I mean, we can do a net gain of somewhere in the area of 1 to 4 a month. So on a property that's 60 residents, so if it's 30% full, it'd take you a year and a half to get there.
And a lot of your people, are they actually moving from a house where they're eating a can of peas, what we just kind of said? Or are they coming from another facility? Like, how long have they been thinking about coming to you before they sign the lease? Is it a week before? Hey, shit, I need to get there. Or is it like years in the making?
The people who are the most successful on moving into assisted living, they've planned this out. They've thought about it. They've made the decision before their kids have come to them and they're like, Mom, it's time. Dad's passed. You left the stove on 4 times this week. It's time we look at a home for you. If you move in earlier, it's going to be much more successful for you and your family. Unfortunately, the trend is people waiting longer and longer to move into assisted living. And most of the time, what has happened is an incident's happened, you're at the hospital, and the doctor says you can't live alone. So now it goes onto the desk of the discharge planner, and the discharge planner of the hospital has a tremendous amount of influence. And they'd go to you and like, your mom can't stay here. Here's 3 options. So if that discharge planner trusts the service that we're providing, the discharge planner will be like, here's 3 options. And I know Cardinal, they do a really good job. And frankly, they have a salesperson who will answer their phone at 2:00 in the morning, and they can move you in anytime, anywhere.
So a lot of your sales is getting in good with discharge planners.
It's earning that trust. I mean, as soon as you earn that trust of that discharge planner, it really, really gets ramped up.
How many people come in against their will that are not happy to be arriving there?
It usually takes about 60 days for someone to really kind of come out of their shell.
Yeah.
I'd say it's probably 50-50 in there.
And so what's going on that 60 days if they're not happy being there? Is it just like you would with I hate to say it, like a child at school? You're just kind of letting them get comfortable, kind of just being nice and friendly and just waiting for, is there certain strategies that y'all have to get people comfortable quicker?
Yeah. So, it's on that. We have a full-time activities department in each of our buildings. So it's on them to integrate that person into our community. We have a resident council. So like you'll see them if you come into our buildings like a big star, and they're like really proud of being on resident council. They're in charge of helping new residents kind of get integrated into the community. But moving for you and I, moving is incredibly stressful. Now you've lived in a house for 60 years, your spouse has died, you're depressed, and your kids made you move into an assisted living home. Like, it's not always a positive experience. And what we try to do is give you the time to kind of like warm up to moving in with Cardinal. But, I've seen 90-year-old people flower and blossom and get a new lease on life and make new friends and really come out of their shell once that socialization is in place.
So what are some of the activities if I'm now I'm not going to be a partner, I'm going to be a resident, what do I get to sign up for? So
behind the scenes, we criticize buildings whose activities department is just church and bingo.
Yeah.
It's like, everything can be an activity. So at some of our buildings, some of the residents like to work. So a lot, especially the men, we give them tasks and chores to do around the house. So one of our buildings, a resident likes to help put away the truck order when the food delivery truck comes in. Our chefs are encouraged to include residents on cooking activities and items like that. We do a lot of stuff with intergenerational. This is obviously pre-COVID, where kids would come in. We've tried to do and have had some success with residents and then the kids of our staff. So around back to school time, we'll have the residents put together back to school gift bags, and then they'll give that to the staff. So it can help build that trust between staff and resident.
What are you doing like Christmas and Thanksgiving and like big holidays? Yeah,
so we're 24/7, 365. We hold Thanksgiving, especially during COVID, where families can't come and get their loved ones. It was really on our team to go above and beyond on the holidays. The big one actually was is Mother's Day.
Okay,
because we're primarily women, and Mother's Day is a big deal. And our activities team, our management style at Cardinal is try to push as much decisions and autonomy onto the building as possible. Because I found that's the best way to get the best out of an activities department. Instead of me in Michigan coming and be like, hey, here's your list of all the activities you have to do. It's, hey, here's your budget. It's higher than what you had before. And I follow you on Facebook, and I just want to see all the stuff you're doing on Facebook. And then I have an email that goes out to all the activities people, and the ones that are doing really cool stuff, I'm like, hey, Melissa, congratulations. That looked really cool, the event you did. And then, the other 6 are like, oh, I want some recognition. So they kind of push themselves.
How do you get paid? Is it, are you paid by the government or are you paid privately?
So we're all private pay. So, our average rent is in the mid 4,000s.
Okay.
So you'd move into one of our buildings and you'd get your rent on the first of the month. And we believe in as much all-inclusive billing as possible. So you would have one bill for your room and board, and then you'd have one bill for your level of care. So the level of care is all the money that goes to the nursing department. So we kind of break down your needs to a rough how many hours per month you need from the nursing department. And then we put that in a care plan, and then you would just pay for that. So
do you have a doctor on staff that prescribes medication and prescribes care? Or do they leave for the day to go to the doctor? The doctor calls you all and says, here's what you need to start giving this patient or this resident.
Yep. So you'd have your own doctor. We actually have house doctors who will come and visit, and they will, you can be with the house doctor if you want, or you can have your own doctor, and then your doctor would give the medication order to the pharmacy, and then we would work with the pharmacy on making sure it gets into our med cart logged. The thing that's crazy about assisted living is, it's not uncommon for someone in our building to have over 30 medications that they have to take every day, some more than once per day. So you think about just like how to manage that and how many issues come because someone who's in their 80s is not taking the medicine that they think they're taking, or they're not tracking all of that. The main reason someone would move into one of our buildings is the amount of medication they have to take is it's simply too much to manage on their own.
And they don't have like a son or a daughter that's coming over every day to help them. So let's just talk about that. 30 medications a day. So like, what would that look like? Is it all happening in the morning, or, somebody's coming in every hour? Like if I'm a patient with 30 a day, what's that nurse's job that's taking care of me?
So we have someone that would be either on the entire building or per hallway, depending on the size of the building, and who's simply on med pass. So she'd be pushing a giant med cart with a computer on it and a scanner. And then she would get your list of all of what you need when you need it. And then she would log when you took it and keep all your medical records there. So if you did go to the hospital, or you go to meet with your doctor, you'd have a complete list of all the medications you're on, all that you've taken, when's the last time you've taken them.
And they watch you take them.
Oh, yeah.
There's not residents like bartering medication for...
No. And it's a big thing when someone passes or moves on, because all their medications are there. So there's strict rules about how to dispose of medications.
So I'm taking, you could be taking up to 30 medications a day. And I don't mean to ask the question like this, but you are a sales organization. So I'll ask it. Are there upsells?
So we don't make a single penny on our levels of care.
Okay.
That's very much like kind of Cardinal policy.
Is that y'all's policy or like a government
That's
policy?
my policy.
Okay.
That's ours. Every dollar, and frankly, the care is the most expensive part of our business. So if I can pass all that on to my customer, I'm like, that's good for me. I make my money on the rent.
Okay. But what about, how do they get paper towels for their room, or Kleenex, or...
We just provide all that.
And that's all in the base rent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing that they could buy that's like, hey, I want a better meal every night, or I want a milkshake or something that is like, okay, but that's an extra $1.
Correct. It's all inclusive, because our residents are on, not only our residents, but our residents' kids are in their late 60s. So, we're dealing with people on fixed incomes, and the worst thing for our residents is surprises.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Do you have any idea of, 4,000 is a lot of money, especially for folks that, we all know people that we thought were going to live 12 more months, and 6 years later, they're still here. How many times do people come in? Like, are their kids paying for it? Is it usually coming from their savings? Is there ways for the government to reimburse them? Like, how are they getting this money?
Most of the time, what happens is you sold the house. So you sold the house using that money to pay for the last, 2 to 5 years of your life. Families will help out, kids will help out. Obviously, savings, if the resident has savings, Social Security will help out. And then in states like Michigan and Ohio and Indiana and a few other states, they have a Medicaid waiver program. So once you run out of money, the state will come in and help with a certain portion of that. Whereas in Pennsylvania, all the Medicaid money is directed to the nursing homes. So in our buildings in Pennsylvania, if you run out of money, I have to discharge you to a higher level of care, where the state could have paid me $4,000 a month to take care of you. But the nursing home, which is higher levels of care, they'll be paying somewhere in there to $9,000 to $12,000 a month in the nursing homes. So I'm actually on the board in Pennsylvania, and we're trying to put a waiver program in place, which is going to ultimately be better for the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It'll be much better for us at Cardinal, and it'll be better for the residents not to have to move.
Weird question. How does medication arrive? Like when I think of 30 medications, I think you go to Walgreens and just what you see behind the pharmacy is all these dudes, like these armored trucks come in like once a day and just deliver medication.
Well, it's not an armored truck; it's a minivan, and there's these pharmacies that are they're called long-term care pharmacies that specialize in working with assisted living and nursing home groups. So they would be just in an industrial building in the middle of whatever good location that they'd be in. The orders come in there. The pharmacist is there. They divvy up the medications, and then they have a driver that drives it to our building.
And is the number one thing that, let's just say I'm bringing my mom, you don't have to go there for a while, but let's just assume we're 20 years down the road. I'm bringing her in. Do most of what the kids care about is like, are you going to love my parent? Or what else do they care about to make a decision?
The kids are scared out of their mind. I mean,
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I mean, from your entire life, it's always been, Mom, should I marry this woman? Mom, my kid's sick. I don't know what to do. Mom, I don't know if I should take this job. Mom, I don't know what to get my wife for her birthday. I mean, you're constantly asking your parents for their advice and their wisdom. And then for the first time in your life, you're now responsible for that. And you have the guilt because you know you can't take care of your loved one anymore. So you have a lot of guilt. You're really scared. And you're like, if I make the wrong choice, Mom's going to die and I killed my mom. Like that's what's kind of going through your head. So it's a very emotional sale. And we train our salespeople of like, no one's shopping for assisted living because it's fun. No one, you go shop for a electric vehicle and you spend all day online and you want to read all about it and you want to be in that process. People who are shopping for assisted living, they want to make the right choice. They want to feel comfortable they're making the right choice and they want to make it now. Like they do not want to do this for 3 years. So a lot of our younger salespeople, what they'll do is at the end of the sale, they'll just be like, well, call me if you have any questions, because they don't want to be like pushy. Where we train our salespeople, you said this, and this is the most important thing for you. I believe we've checked all those boxes. Are you ready to make a commitment? Is how we train our salespeople to ask for the close, because no one is like out shopping like their whole life for assisted living. Everyone's new to this. They don't know any of the lingo. They don't know any of the sandboxes. I mean, everything is an education from the beginning. And it's really important that our salespeople are true professionals who are guiding the entire process, not just sitting there answering questions and serving as some tour guide.
All right. Sorry for a loaded question. What's some of the lingo and what are the sandboxes?
Yep. So the sandboxes would be that active adult, independent living, assisted living. So a lot of times they don't even know what services that they need. So, we would go out and do an assessment on your loved one, clearly let you know what level of care that they would be in. Kind of, we're very open about our pricing. You can go on our website and see where we're priced. We are usually either the price leaders in our market or close to the price leaders. So we do affordable assisted living, and we're proud of that. And a lot of our buildings, what we'll do is we'll do shared occupancy rooms. So if you can't afford $4,000 a month, you can get that down closer to $3,000 a month if you're willing to have a roommate.
Okay, what are the fixed expenses of the business? Like what are your fixed costs and what are your variable costs?
So my number one cost is labor. About 70% of all my expenses is related to labor in some aspect.
Okay.
Rent is usually in that 10 to 12% of my revenue is what my rent number is. I've got insurance and I've got dietary expenses for mainly food. But what I spend all day looking at is what's my occupancy and what are my hours, my productive hours that I've run. So my labor. That's like kind of the two most important numbers to me when I'm looking at our business.
Because you said as long as we take care of our people and we get great people in here, like everything else will take care of itself. And that's so the guiding mission is let's treat our people great. Let's fill this place up with great people that want to be here. And then the expenses will kind of take care. Is there any like major risk and I want to talk a little bit about insurance and legal. It just seems like you're just a target for legal action. And can we get into that a little bit?
Definitely.
Like, when I think about it as a guy in my shoes, it's never known your world. And when you hear about this business, everybody's like, it's an operating business. You don't want to, it's so tough. You getting sued all the time?
Yeah, we carry professional liability insurance where it's just part of the business.
Yeah.
We don't get sued as much as the nursing homes do, but we do get it quite a bit. There are legitimate reasons to sue a assisted living provider, and there are a lot of people who aren't legitimate, who are constantly just throwing claims in. We obviously have a lot of workers' comp because we have a lot of employees, so workers' comp's a big issue. So the legal part is it's just part of the business, and frankly, us operators, we love to scare you real estate people into it's so scary, man. Yeah. It's so hard. You need us. That's why those fees are double.
You're doing a good job. What are some of the reasons why you might get sued?
Mainly not passing medications correctly.
Yeah.
So medication management's a huge part of our business. We take that very seriously. To get hired at Cardinal, a high school diploma or a high school student, with a good attitude, they can join our team, but to get on that med cart, that's a huge step. So those people on the med cart are a whole different level of training. We put them in different uniforms, and that's because that is our business.
You said something before we even got on the podcast, and you said that the most important thing that you can do with your residents is keep their dignity.
Yeah.
Explain what that means.
So this kind of saying of Cardinal, or kind of like what our values are, is care, compassion, dignity, and safety. And the dignity piece is so overlooked in our industry. And when I walk into our building, I look at all of our residents. I look at their fingernails. I look if they're shaved. I look at their hair. I look at their clothes. And that dignity, our residents move in because they need assistance. And it's our responsibility to preserve their dignity. And it's so important for people like us who are entrusted with our residents' lives and their dignity to treat that with respect.
Yeah.
I'll give you a story on that. So we had one family, and once we opened up for COVID, they came in and they were a really difficult family, and they took their loved one out of the building, got them their favorite meal, which wasn't in their dietary restrictions, kind of gave our staff a little bit of like a tough time. A staff comes back, and then the resident had an incontinent issue, and took 3 of our staff 45 minutes to clean up the resident and preserve that resident's dignity. And I asked, because the family was, they were giving our staff a tough time, and I went to our executive director and I'm like, are you going to call the family and explain what happened? And it's like, no, we're responsible for that resident's dignity. And that's not a dignified way. That's not what the resident would want us to do. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so lucky that I get to go to work with you every day.
So when you show up at a facility, you're looking at dignity. Like, what are you doing when you're there for the day? What brings you joy when you're walking through these places?
So I get to kind of be the cheerleader of our company, which is, it's just the best. I love what I get to do for a living. So I'll usually show up at the building about an hour outside the building. I'll start an hour before I get there, turn the radio off and start looking kind of at the community, try to get an idea of the first impression. Because a lot of times when you work in a building, it's like you see the same thing every day. So like missing paint or something like that, you'll miss. So then I get to the building, I do an exterior inspection, go in, I walk the vacants. So I go see every single one of our vacant apartments with our salesperson to get an idea how well they know their inventory and just how well our maintenance team is getting rooms flipped. And then I'll sit down with the executive director and I'll do red, yellow, green with each of our staff members. Green makes sense. Anyone who's yellow, they have to have a verbal plan on how to get to green. Anyone who's red has to have a written plan on how they get to green. When I come back, no one can stay yellow twice. So if someone's a yellow, they're either a green or a red. And anyone who's red twice is terminated in that scenario. So I do that HR function with our executive director.
Wait, say that one more time.
Yep.
So everybody at on location is either a green, a yellow, or a red.
Correct.
And that's based on their performance.
That's correct.
And so when you say a written versus a verbal, what does that mean?
Yep. So if you now you work for me, so
now I work for you, dude. I'm wearing all hats. But I will finish as a partner.
So our resident, our employee would, you would have your manager.
Yeah.
Your manager would keep kind of a running tab on what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. If you're a yellow, my biggest fear is that you don't know that you're a yellow. So you're like kind of walking around. You don't get what is expected of you. You don't understand what the responsibilities are. You weren't trained properly. So the yellow is for your director to go to you and say, like, look, you're yellow and you're yellow for these reasons. I need you to do this. It's like kind of a verbal course correction. Most yellows can be corrected, with just drawing attention to it. The reds, what would happen is you'd be asked into your manager's office. It'd be a sit-down meeting. It'd be a written performance plan. I need you to do this, this, and this. This is unacceptable. And, you have 30 days to turn it around.
But you can't move from a red to a yellow. You're either red back to green or yellow
Correct.
back to green.
Yeah.
There is no red, yellow. Yeah.
Yep. So if you're red, you're either a green or you're fired.
How am I doing right now?
You're green.
I'm a green?
You're green.
Okay. I'm a verbal green. And so you get there, you do the exterior, you walk all the vacants. What does a unit look like in your facilities? Is it like a hotel room, kind of a bed, TV, bathroom, closet?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Recliner?
Yep, we have recliners. We don't provide recliners, but the family will bring those in. And then some of our competitors or some of like the higher end facilities will have like kitchenettes and they'll actually make one bedroom, full apartments, but we're mainly like a hotel room.
What are residents not allowed to have in their room?
Anything with fire.
That's it?
Yeah, anything with fire.
Are they allowed to smoke outside if they want to smoke?
Yep, smoke outside. Some of the buildings we've taken over, they've allowed smoking inside, and you can't take that away. So you just got to wait them out.
Wait that resident out?
Wait that resident out.
Why? Because that's dignity? Like you would be taking away their dignity to...
Frankly, that was the deal when they kind of showed up.
Yeah, as I get to smoke inside.
Yeah, they get to smoke inside. And if you ever try to take cigarettes away from a 90-year-old person, it's better fought somewhere else.
And it's 24/7. So does everybody kind of go to bed around? Is it like everybody can go to bed whenever they want? Like it's lights out by 9:00. How do you manage bedtime? And on a percentage basis, how many tenants need care like throughout the night? Like I've stayed in the hospital several times for random stuff, and I've got a nurse coming in at 2 a.m. Is that?
So our third shift staff is definitely the least populated staff.
Okay.
I mean, after 6:00, it's pretty slow
Okay.
in our line of work. We actually call lunchtime supper. So that's actually the biggest meal of the day, which helps our residents sleep because they don't have a bunch of food in their stomach. So they'll have breakfast. They'll come for supper middle of the day and then have a light dinner before bed.
So what are we cooking?
So when you go into a senior living building,
That's a big deal for me.
If you had
now I'm a resident.
So when you go to take over a building and you go stand in front of all the staff, all the residents, and you have this grand plan of all this stuff that you're going to say, and you go up there and you talk about the mission of Cardinal, all this other stuff, the very first question you'll get is my rent going up and when's the food going to get better? Like that is like, that's all anyone wants to talk to me about is the food. And everyone has an opinion on the food. And you're eating out of the same kitchen all 3 meals a day. Some people love it. Some people don't like it. So what we try to do is have a resident council where the residents will meet with the chef on a regular basis. And then the chef takes all that feedback and does the best that they can.
Do you all bring in your own meal plan once you all take over, or do you just stick with what was there?
So the theme of how we try to do management is push as much decision making onto the team as possible, onto the building. So the menu is completely up to that dietary director at that building. So they don't have to match menus with other buildings. They don't even have to buy always from the same vendor. So if they want to go to the farmer's market to get something, they want to do something else, they have full control and autonomy over their menus.
And I don't mean to go back to something we were talking about, but I didn't get total clarity. How how long from the time somebody shows up to the time they make a decision? Is it often that day or that week? Like it's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's usually within the month.
Yeah.
It's within the month with, we call them emergency move-ins are pretty common, where someone's at the hospital, they can't go home, and we got to scramble and figure out a way to get them in.
How many people, let's talk about something that's maybe not as positive. I want to go through COVID a little bit, and I want to go through, you had made a comment. Obviously, death is like a normal thing in your business. I think you told me of 600 residents, 12 pass away every month.
Yep, that's about.
So from a cultural standpoint, how do you bake that into the culture to where it's just not this constant Debbie Downer situation? And like, how is death kind of like, how do you think about it? That's a very, from my world, that's very weird. If anybody died in my company, or not my company, but my tent, that would just be a shock. In your business, it's part of the business.
Yeah, you do kind of get used to it pretty quickly. And it does help that the person who's dying is in their 80s and 90s and has led a very full life. And frankly, if everything goes well for you and me, that's frankly how we end up. You're in a private pay assisted living building surrounded by people that love you and care for you, and you pass in your 90s or 100. I mean, that's a good run. Death is the thing all of us share. All of us are going to experience that. That's part of living. And, getting to be around death on a regular basis has really brought kind of clarity to me and my life. And it's actually one of the reasons I love the line of work that I'm in. It really it's kind of puts it all in perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, we do, I average about 20 move outs a month. And they'll go to either higher levels of care, or they run out of money, go to higher levels of care, need more care, go to higher levels of care, or they'll pass. That's usually what happens. And about 12 of those 20 will pass. And then the other 8 will either run out of funds or need more care.
What happens when somebody passes away?
So when someone passes away in our building, it's something I struggled with a lot at the beginning. I didn't know what to do. So I went and talked to our residents. And because, if you have 12, so that's somewhere in the area of 3 a week. So you're supposed to like call them out and announce them at lunchtime. Like that's like such a huge bummer. What we've done is just let the administrators and the nursing staff handle it at their building, how they feel comfortable doing that.
But what would be like a typical way of handling it? Like it kind of is a rumor mill and everybody just kind of knows that something happened, or do they tell the residents? Or
it usually depends on the residents. So there's definitely like resident favorites or people who've been there a long time. And, sometimes the staff will attend the funerals. Sometimes we'll do full cards where the residents can sign it and give it to the families. But it really depends on the resident and what impact that resident has on the culture. So sometimes, of the 12, one of them would have hit a building really, really tough, and the staff would be, real sad about that, and that one would be a tough death. This is how we describe it.
Okay, so you were doing, and this is the more astonishing fact. So in normal times, you were doing, or you weren't doing, but 12 deaths were occurring amongst your residents. What was going on during? Let's spend like a 5-10 minutes on COVID. We can talk about the death rate during COVID, but I also just want to talk about what March 15th last year looked like for you and how you kind of handled those first couple months. You were in a real rough sector of the economy.
Yeah. So COVID happens when everyone hears about that nursing home in Seattle. So all those residents passed away from this virus. People didn't know. I think it was called COVID. Didn't really know what it was. The investors that we had in our buildings knew the guy that owned that building, and I mean they had to shut the building down. And that building was like a $40-50 million building, so went to zero value wise. I mean, so from the business perspective, it was like pretty freaky. And then everyone's like, no one's going to move into assisted livings. And then the craziest thing happened, like our resident count went up. So like April was a great month. May was a great month. We had shut down our visitors. We were, before the state shut down the visitors. We shut down our visitors in our building. And then COVID was in our area, and assisted living after assisted living is just getting crushed by this COVID that no one knew. And this was before testing was like a big thing. So I spent 3 weeks calling. We both of us are in the YPO group. I used the YPO group to source some test kits out of Alabama. So we were the first in our areas to do testing. That was a huge component. Then the PPE shortage was like a big issue. So we're trying to source that, but still hadn't got any COVID in our buildings. August comes around and you're kind of like freaked out, but you're like, our business is actually in a pretty good spot right now. August comes out, hits our first building, 20 people die in 2 days, whole building gets shut down. The big issue that you're having with COVID for our business was what happens if the staff doesn't show up? Because, I mean, you took a $12 an hour job to play bingo with residents and help a resident like take a shower. You did not sign up to be in full PPE and putting your, life on the line. And frankly, this is when all the pandemic unemployment was coming out as well. So all these, your boyfriend, your son, your neighbor, all of them are at home making more money than you are, and you're going in full PPE with people who are dying left and right. And we got to the point where 12 people a week were dying of COVID, and I was doing an 8 a.m. phone call. So I'd wake my kid up, get him some breakfast, put him in front of an iPad, and then I would go sit there and I would hear who died the night before, who has it, how many people tested positive, and I know of the people that tested positive, 20% of those would be dead in about 48 hours. I mean, it was awful. And if an elderly person got it, they would turn this like kind of grayish, like you could see it on their skin. And it was so strange too, because, if a relatively healthy resident would get it and like a very, very frail resident would get it, you would think like the frail resident would be the one who passed, and it would be the healthy one who passed. And it was just so strange, and there was no answers, because you'd be asking all these questions, and your staff would be like, "Oh, how did it get in?" And they're like, "I don't know. Like we're taking on water here, man." And my biggest fear throughout all of COVID, from a business perspective, was simply that our employees would stop showing up for work. So I'd just sit on the phone. I'd call them because I couldn't go in the buildings. I couldn't visit them, and I felt so helpless through that whole process. During the worst part of it, all I could eat was bananas. That's like all I could eat, because I was just carrying that much stress. Because you're responsible for 600 residents and 500 employees. We had employees. I mean, we employ people in their 60s. I mean, a lot of our employees are people who've retired and they need to make an extra few bucks, and they like hanging out with the elderly. So, I mean, we're employing people who are, a high risk population. So, I mean, it was absolutely brutal. And we were vaccinated at the end of January, and we went from losing 12 people a week to not a single person testing positive, not a single person in the hospital, not a single death. We've not had a single positive case on any of our buildings since our residents got vaccinated.
But that lasted from August to January?
August to January, with the worst part of it being the second wave. That was the hardest that we got hit.
And you would have these calls in the morning, and what would you do after the call?
Just go get a cup of coffee and just be like, well, it's just...
Like, was there something you had to do with that information, or was it more just peace of mind? Or like, as the leader of the company, what did you do that day when the new list came out?
So when the list came out, there was someone on the call who would have to report it to the CDC and to the state, and we'd give them all of our numbers. I'd sit on calls of, trying to get PPE, trying to get, there were some grant programs available to try to get some hazard pay for our team, but it was incredibly helpless feeling. Just sitting there, and I cared about our business. Like, I mean, I put a lot of effort into our business, but just knowing that our team was going through that and there was nothing I could do. I did in our Michigan buildings work in some of our COVID buildings, and would do full PPE and kind of get in there with them. But I mean, I don't have a health background or care background, so I was just doing everything I could from the sidelines. And now that we've made it through COVID, I'm just so proud of the people that I get to work with.
Incredible.
There was 202 employees who've worked with us from the very beginning of COVID all the way through. So we have a golden Cardinal pin that is getting printed up, and next month I'll be hand delivering to each of the 202 employees, and they'll wear that pin, for the rest of their Cardinal career, and that will, signify people who went way above and beyond, way more than that they were ever asked to do. And, I'm internally and as a society, we should be grateful for those people who showed up in those buildings.
Dude, that's incredible. And these people showed up because they have a heart, not because they had to, not because the government was making them show up. It was like, we're not going to
let our residents pass in this way. We're all that they have. So, there's a lot of talk, and I have frustrations about the current hiring and, difficulties that we're having now. But, there are thousands of assisted living workers making less than $15 an hour who could have made more money staying home, who chose to go in full PPE and protect the lives of their residents. And this happened all over this country. And, they don't get the thank yous that they deserve. And I don't think I could ever truly thank them for what they did. But, I'll always remember it as their company, because if it wasn't for them, there would be no more Cardinal.
I got chills. Well, I'm not an employer right now, so I'm not getting a pin. Dude, that is absolutely incredible. That puts a lot more in perspective of what happened. I've been pretty insulated from this. And for some reason, that was maybe one of my questions. Was this going on all over the country, or was it isolated to the coasts? Because I'm in Texas and I have heard nothing of this until now.
One of the things that's tough is an assisted living provider is you don't want to really tell people how bad it actually got.
Right.
And I kind of made the decision relatively recently to tell the truth of kind of what actually was happening in our buildings, because of the heroic effort that our staff, went through. And I think that story needs to be shared of what they did. It was the worst 6 to 8 months of my professional career. It was horrible. And I'm proud of what we did at Cardinal, and frankly feel, that if I was able to get through this, and if Cardinal was able to get through this, now we can have some fun.
Yeah, you're the real deal, dude. Not to stay on a sad story, but give me 2 more minutes on what did it look like inside of the facilities every day? Was everybody locked down to their room? Was this, I'm not saying jail, but for 6 to 8 months, I'm assuming there wasn't bingo, there was not, socials and everything, or what was it like to be a resident the last 6 to 8 months?
It was horrible. You're in your room, and you think we were locked in our houses where we could go walk outside with the dog, and you could see your wife and kids, and it was inconvenience, and it wasn't fun. Our residents were inside their little hotel rooms for 24 hours, 365. And then when the only way to keep them safe was to have full PPE when we went in and served them food and stuff. So you're just, the only human you're interacting with is someone in just it looks like an alien, coming in. Then they'd have to take it all off, leave it at the door, put the new stuff on, go in the other ones. And our staff did as much as they could activity wise. We made ice cream carts out of wheelchairs and kind of try to make it fun. But we try to bring in the Facebook portal so they could call their families and such. But I really feel for our residents and all that they went through for COVID. Loneliness is a huge reason you move into assisted living. We all know the dangers of being lonely. And then because of COVID, the only solution was to make them the loneliest they've ever been in their whole life. So, I really was happy now that we're opening our buildings up again and getting the activities back. We've got family meetings going on again in family visits. Residents can go out of the building and, really start to expand their quality of life.
So awesome, dude. That's unbelievable. On the vaccines, how did that work? Would they show up and administer them on site?
Yep. So
and y'all were first in line, obviously.
Yep, we were first in line. CVS or Walgreens would come to our building. All of our residents would get vaccinated. We do our best to educate staff to get our staff vaccinated. It really went building by building. Some buildings, the staff was very hesitant about the vaccine. Some of the buildings, the staff was all about getting vaccinated. The big discussion in assisted living right now is if companies are going to mandate their employees get vaccinated. Where I'm kind of sitting here, I'm like, I really would hope the state government or the federal government would mandate that, so I don't have to be the one, because staffing's hard enough already. And if I said everyone has to be vaccinated, I'm going to lose some good people who are just going to go work for another company. But we also have not had any positive cases or deaths from any of our residents. So right now, as we sit here, end of May, I'm just kind of sitting and watching. We have not mandated that our staff is fully vaccinated.
So you've gone through probably the most difficult, even difficult amongst difficult. Like, you were in a segment of the world that was about as difficult. You're in YPO, you get to interact with leaders all the time. Like, give me some leadership lessons. Like, what is something you learned looking back in hindsight that served you well? Was there advice that you were given along the way? Like, how we're young, we're 34 years old. You haven't been around 50 years yet to know all these. Like, how, if you were sitting here now going like, this is how to be a leader in hindsight, looking back, what was some things that served you well?
Yeah, the YPO group was incredibly helpful, talking to other people who are kind of in my same situation and maybe had been a little bit ahead of me. And I think I struggled a lot early in my career of kind of like that imposter syndrome, because the company grew so quickly.
Yeah.
And it seemed like overnight we had 500 employees, and I don't have a care background. So in the back of my head, I was always thinking like, I'm a fraud, or someone's going to figure me out, that I'm not the right person for this job. And through COVID, I try to keep as much of a level head and tell people, like, take your time off, take your PTO, play the long game. This is a marathon. Try not to let anyone see me freak out, and just kind of been kind of calm and understanding, and let people, cry on my shoulder, and just try to be a steady force in a world with not a lot of answers. And, for the first time in my life, I feel like that I was the right person for the job. And I carry a level of confidence running Cardinal that are like, well, when things were the worst and I was in that position, I was the right person for the job. So I kind of take that lesson going forward. And that was the advice kind of mentors of mine gave me. He's like, you got this, you can do this.
So awesome. I'm so glad we're partners.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get back to a few fun things about the industry, and then we'll do some personal stuff. But how is there any technology going on in the industry, whether it's software or better medications? Like, is there anything on the horizon that could have a profound impact on the industry, positive or negative?
So the call bell system has been huge. So it's kind of seeing where in the building your staff is when they've talked to a resident, because ultimately, you have most of our residents have dementia. So you get a call from your mom, and you're like, I hit my call bell and no one came for like 9 hours, and I was laying on the floor and no one ever answers, and you freak out. And then you call the administrator and come in, and you're ready to just raise hell. And you're like, Chris, your mom has dementia. She rang her call bell this time. It was answered this. And it kind of brings some sanity to it. So the call bell system has been a huge advance for our line of work. And I'm getting pitched all the time technology solutions. And when I was first starting Cardinal, it seemed like every week I was rolling out a new technology solution to our staff who got into assisted living and taking care of the elderly, so they didn't have to work with computers. Like, that's why they chose this line of work. So, I had to take some humble medicine of like, no, our staff doesn't need a new computer, a new device every 6 weeks. So now I've taken the approach where any new technology I'm pretty cautious of. I'll go watch it in other buildings. I'll take 6-8 months before making a decision on it. I really think the future, as technology interacts with the elderly, that we're a lot farther away than a lot of people who are up pitching things think we are. And I mean, I could certainly be wrong, but I think at the core, it's about love and care.
Yeah.
It's not about speed.
Yep. Are there cameras? Like, can if my mom's there, is there a camera in her room I can just kind of watch her, or is that not a thing?
You could set one up, but I can't.
Yeah.
Set one up.
Yeah.
I can set up sensors to, like, if she falls, that it would sense that someone's on the ground. That is allowed, but actual cameras are not.
There's like an infomercial that Joe Namath does or something. It's like, I've fallen and I can't get up, and what is it? It's like a key fob or something.
Life alert.
Yeah, life alert. Yeah, I would imagine if somebody's setting up a camera, even if I'm doing it, you're still probably like, hey, I'm going to let you set up the camera, but please don't call us every hour because your view of what's happening in the camera isn't like the right thing.
Yeah. A lot of times people you want to say, like, if your mom moves into assisted living, you think that someone's around her all the time. And there are two huge needs for someone. I put them in the category of companionship and care.
Yeah.
Like, you're paying for care. If I charged you for the companionship that your loved one needs, like around the clock socialization, I mean, we have activities for that. And the goal is to try to get your loved one to make friends. And then that companionship can be, kind of a give and take between other residents. But, if you look at our call bell data, it's, the average is here, and then there'll be two outliers who are 5, 6, 7 standard deviations away from the mean, like two people who are just so lonely. They're like hitting that call bell.
Do people get married or like boyfriend, girlfriend in their late 80s?
Yeah, that happens. There is one story of a priest that actually moved into one of the buildings, and celibate, never had a spouse or anything, gets dementia, and then has a girlfriend in assisted living. So the parishioners come in and they're like, you can't have this. You got to like tell him. Oh, and I was like, that's not me, man. He's happy. Like, these are consenting adults. I mean, if resident safety was at risk, then we'd get involved. But it's their life, it's their house, and as much as we can treat them as adults, the more. But that's what we want to do.
Do 87-year-olds and at that age, is that considered the greatest generation?
So we are having greatest generation, and then we have some of the silent generation. So we're kind of losing our World War II veterans.
Yep.
And we're getting Korea War veterans.
Okay.
Right now. You'd be shocked at how many people over 100 live in our building. The trivia question for you is the fastest growing part of our population in the United States is people over 100. In the year 2000, in the census, there's about 50,000 Americans who are over 100. And the last census is 90,000. Projections are that by 2050, there'll be over 500,000 people over 100. For you and I at 34, somewhere in there, like a 16 to 18% chance that we'll make it over 100. So that's kind of like a big thing that's driving assisted living is people are living much, much longer.
That's good for business.
That's great for business.
It doesn't seem like it would be, it's hard to save for 30 years of assisted living rent payments. Is that something you worry about, or that's for the government to figure out?
It's something I think about a lot.
Okay.
Something I think about a lot. And we are specifically going after facilities at low price points. We're specifically looking at how does this next wave of seniors who don't have the money the first wave of seniors have, how are they able to stretch their dollars? So, I mean, we are in each of our buildings doing double occupied rooms. We're doing experiments with chores, like how much responsibility can we put on the residents to bring our staffing levels down. And I think about it all the time of it seems all my competitors want to talk about is like amenities. And for us at Cardinal, it's all, affordability. I'd love to be able to grow Cardinal to the point where when you think like affordable assisted living, that's us.
Let's go there for a bit. What's the next? What's if 10 years from now, if things go like what's your vision?
Yeah, I'd love to continue to grow the Cardinal portfolio. I'd like to serve more seniors. Right now, we're the 135th largest assisted living operator in the country. I'd love to, get in the top 50. I'd love to continue to grow our company. And frankly, because we do look at it a little bit differently than everyone else, I think the affordability component is a huge issue, and it's someone needs to focus on it. Why not be us?
And valuations set in the industry at a per property level or per community level on EBITDA, just a multiple of EBITDA.
It's just a cap rate on EBITDA.
And how would you be valued if you have 50 of these things? Just a multiple of EBITDA?
Yeah. I mean, it would be, unfortunately, there's really not a market to sell your leases. So you can't really sell your opcos. So I have to find a way to get in on the real estate side because that's where all the value creation is assigned.
Are you in on the real estate side?
So in Pennsylvania, on the 7 buildings, I have a carried interest in the profitability once those ultimately sell. Yeah. And then in Michigan, I am in on the real estate side on Michigan.
So you get the profits of the OpCo in existence, and then one day, whenever everything sells, you have an interest in that piece as well.
Correct. So traditionally, companies like mine, what they would do is they'd go in, they'd partner with some private equity groups. They'd buy a whole bunch of separate buildings all in one region. They build the occupancy and then they'd sell it off to a REIT. And then they would lease from the REIT and they do a sale lease back. And that would be kind of the liquidity event for a group like us. And then we'd use that money to go do it again and then liquidate to a REIT.
All right. 2 more questions kind of on the tenant profile. And you had said something earlier, don't mean to jump back, but now it's in my head. What happens to people in prison that get really old? Do they typically not make it that long? Like, what if you're 80 years old and you're serving a life sentence? Do they have assisted living facilities for prisoners, or they can't live in a cell when they're 80, can they? Do you even know?
That was a great question. I have no idea.
Like, I've talked to people on or I've asked my wife this before. It's like, because we watch, Dateline or something. It's like, well, this person has a life sentence. Like, okay, but by like 70 or 80, they're not, some serial killer anymore. I don't know if people make it that long in prison, but I always have wondered, where they go after they get old enough.
That's a great question.
Yeah. I mean,
I found what we can partner on.
We'll just form another partnership. We already have a great one going right now.
Yeah, it's going
great. Okay. You said something earlier. You get to hang out with old people all the time. And you're like, I love hanging out with old people. Typical 34-year-old probably doesn't have a ton of interest hanging out with old people. Why do you love old people? And like, what's something that a listener could take away that is your unique perspective of the world?
I think looking at an elderly person selfishly, the people who love old people look at it from a perspective of like, there by the grace go I, kind of that they're just looking at an extension of them when they become old, and they want to treat that person in a way that they want to be treated. So in our line of work, we're primarily not only a female like resident population, but we're primarily like a female workforce. Most of the people that work for me are female. So when I go into assisted living buildings, I specifically try to go talk to the guys, because no matter how many times I say it, the activities are always very female focused. So I would, bring bourbon in and sit with our elderly male residents and chit chat about, most of them are veterans. So we talk mainly about war and their service or their community. A lot of business owners like live in our buildings. So, talk to them about what they've got going on. I like to share what I'm working on and what I'm bothered with, and they provide, they've mostly gone to the point where they are living kind of vicariously through other people. So they like to share stories of their grandkids and their kids and talk through that. But I find it in a go world, being in assisted living where the biggest activity for the day is, going to get supper. And, when you talk to them, you have their full attention, which, is kind of rare and nowadays. And
Yeah.
so I just find it like a relaxing whenever I leave the buildings, I always feel better than when I walked in.
That's so cool. How many deals will you do maybe this year or next year?
So we were doing about 2 a year.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, and I'd like to get back to doing 2 to 3 a year.
Is just like all asset classes right now, like everything's inflated. Is the price of assisted living going up? Are people more freaked out because of what happened during COVID? Like, is there more opportunity, less, same?
We're seeing deals right now trading below what they were in 2015. So
why?
Just less operators willing to expand. Not a lot of people who are buying. We have a deal we're looking at in one of our markets, and it's a higher quality building than what we had, and it's priced at a lower per bed rate than what we paid in our market. So I think everyone was waiting for the deals to show up in assisted living. Now that PPP money's kind of run out, a lot of the federal money's kind of run out, that there'll start to be a lot of facilities up for sale in the next few years, or frankly this year, next year.
And are you going to stay in just assisted living? Like, I'm wondering, since you know that a lot of your residents are eventually going to nursing, why aren't you in nursing?
So running a nursing home business is so different than running an assisted living business. You are dealing with insurance companies all day, every day. The back end office is completely different. And there have been hundreds of companies like mine who've tried to do nursing home, or nursing home people who've tried to do assisted living, and I've not seen it go well once. Like, it is a totally different business. Even though you're dealing with the same residents and similar staff, it is so incredibly difficult. And I've got a YPO friend who's one of the largest operators of skilled nursing in the country. And him and I talk about it all the time. He's like, I'm never going to go do assisted living. I don't know why you guys do that. And I'm like, I don't know why you do that.
Would you buy, forgive me, what's the category before y'all?
Independent living.
Would you ever get there?
So independent living, that's tough, because that is more, you're trying to sell a lifestyle in independent living, and the baby boomers have shown an ability to like not want to look like their parents. So this independent living and what that ultimately looks like for affordability and pricing, that's much more like apartments.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm just going to stay in my lane with the assisted living.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Last question on industry, and then we'll get to personal. Anything politically that bothers you about your industry? Is there anything that the government jacks with you on, or because of COVID, there's going to be all these new regulations, or?
There's the biggest one is the not using the Medicaid money in the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer that we're unfortunately making life harder for everyone, and like kind of no one wins. So I think that will ultimately get fixed. The states were not that helpful when COVID hit, and frankly, no one had seen it. There wasn't a plan in place, so I don't really hold that against them. And I think ultimately the people in our world, the regulators in our world, do, for the most part, care about the elderly. They might see things a little bit differently than I see it, but whether it's a banker, a regulator, me, a family, an employee, if the cornerstone is love for the resident, I can pretty much work through any issue there. We might not always see things the same way, but if there's that deep love and compassion there and wanting to do the right thing, which most people in our space really do want to do the right thing, we'll work through it. We'll get it figured out.
Yep. All right. You know what we'll do? We'll take like 3 Twitter questions.
Let's do it.
You want to do it? All right, let's see. This is just an opinion. David Ando. How can people experiencing poverty afford this as a sustainable long-term option?
So each state is going to be very different on the level of assistance they provide for people who need assisted living. If you are destitute, and I would move to the state of Minnesota. They're the best at reimbursing assisted living providers. You'd have the most choice there. We provide in Michigan. We have some Medicaid assisted living beds that I would put my loved one in. I'm really proud of the service that we're doing there. So, I'd choose your state wisely.
All right, two more. Our friend Rich Jordan, who is a guest, and you've kind of already answered this. How do you approach the distributed nature of your business, given that you're in Michigan and most of your properties are there? What's your communication cadence, reporting, et cetera? Like, what do you need to feel good going to bed at night in Michigan?
Yeah, so what I do is really believe in the distributed teams. I really believe in passing as much responsibility on to the executive director as possible. We role play again. You work for me. You're one of our executive directors. I say you're the CEO of your business. My job is just to provide a mirror to different parts of your business that you might not be able to see from your seat. I'm here to give you as much information as you can so you make the right decision for your residents. I know you love your residents. That's why you have been doing this your whole life.
So you're kind of like the Warren Buffett of assisted living in Pennsylvania. We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
I won't ask what Elizabeth Burdine asked, which was how to stay healthy and put assisted living out of business. You saw that question. I think we already touched on this, but I think it's a good point. Kevin Clark said, what's going to happen in the next 15 years as boomers age into, like, the biggest population are about to age into you. We've talked about development being expensive. These things are already full. Like, how are you thinking about the demand headed your way?
Yeah. So if you think about boomers and you're talking a few years from now, they'll officially be 65, and my average resident's 87. So we are the boomer generation. When we think about boomers, like, that's the kids of our residents. I'm really looking at assisted living really starting to pick up 10 years from now, which is really exciting for me being 34. That, like, prime of my career and prime of Cardinal, if that's not until I'm 50, that actually aligns with the trends in our industry perfectly. So we think about at Cardinal, or I think about a lot of times, just playing the long game, trying to develop great staff, and really try to be ready for 20 years from now.
Yep. All right, a few more personal, and then we'll bring it home. Do you have a morning routine, or like something that you kind of start your day with?
Well, I'm really glad to get rid of the 8 a.m. call as part of my morning routine.
I'm glad we've gotten rid of that.
So I get to drive my kid to daycare, who's right next to my office. I don't do meetings before like 9:30, so I have a pretty relaxed morning. Spend a lot of time with him, my son Jackson, and then just get him to daycare. I try to take it slow in the morning. I don't try to like jam a bunch of stuff in. I try to do the like wake up early and meditate and lift weights and all that, and it ended up didn't work for me.
Man, I gotta just say, and I said this on the Rich Jordan podcast, and no offense to all the other great guests, but you just strike me as just an incredible leader. Is any of that coming from childhood experiences that you had, or your parents, or like, what kind of made you so grounded?
I grew up kind of in the suburbs of Detroit. Kind of had my dad's a computer programmer. Mom was a homemaker, stayed at home with us. I played a lot of soccer, like a lot of team sports. I think that probably was where I learned, just how to play nice with others and kind of work in a team environment. I feel my dad, I think he means this kindly, but he describes me as like, Joe's really not good at anything, like great. He's not great at anything. He's like good at most stuff, and he's willing to like ask people for help. And like, that's his description of me. And he's like, the reason you've been successful is because you're not like really great at anything and you need help. And I think that's probably true, of just accepting that I'm so far out of my league on almost everything. So it makes it easier to get help.
You're a very humble person. All right. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Best advice I was ever been given?
Let me ask you. Well, you can answer that one, but I'm going to rephrase the question.
All right. What's the rephrase?
If somebody was getting into the industry, what's the best advice you would give to somebody that's going to walk your walk?
Focus on the residents, focus on the staff. I mean, love on those residents, respect that staff. I mean, our industry, if you go on Glassdoor, is like full of people just bashing all the largest companies in our space who just treat their employees like human sausage. Like, they do not care, and they know that our staff will love our residents no matter how bad you treat them. So you don't have to pay them well, you don't have to give them benefits, you don't have to show them any respect. And that's kind of been the MO of like assisted living. And if you just go in and instead of working with the staff of being like, you don't know this, you don't know that, you're not know how to use the computer very well, you know, blah, blah, blah. If you go in and you're like, we're going to be great together, you know, how's your kids, you know, really care about your staff. I mean, they'll run through walls for you.
Yeah.
And if your residents know that, and the families know that they're going to be loved when they go into the building, the staff knows they're going to be appreciated, like the numbers will figure themselves out.
Yep. All right, man. How can people reach you?
Yep. So I'm on Twitter, just at Joe Pohlen. My email, our website's Live Cardinal, also spelled Live Cardinal, Live. So it's just jpollen@livecardinal.com. Send me an email.
Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Chris.
This was awesome.
All right.